Hello everybody, welcome to StraightA. Dawson here, back with Week 9, Week 10, and Week 11 of Madden 24 Fantasy Football. If you haven't seen the other episodes, go and check those out before you start watching this video, because there's a lot of important information you got to gather before we go into this week. This is the last episode of the regular season non-divisional matchups, meaning we have one more I should say, regular season episode, and then we have the playoffs, which will be determined by the results of all these games leading up to it. So if you enjoy the video, please leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and comment any suggestions for future videos down below. Without further ado, guys, let's get right into the video. Going into Week 9, we have some interesting matchups here to kind of see. The standings of all the teams so far is actually quite even in all things considering. Anybody's game thus far to either win their division or at least clinch the playoffs with that wild card spot. So we'll move forward if I can ever click on this little slides thing. First of all, we have Us facing off against Kittle Big Town. Us has been one of the better teams in this league so far, only about 6 points behind the fifth in points for, and has been doing extremely well. They have a 5-3 record, one of the best in the league. Well, Kittle Big Town has one of the worst points for, and also really good luck when it comes to matchups. Like last week, they did take a loss, so they're 4-4 now, but they have had very fortunate matchups to keep their record in pretty good standings right now. So in all things considering, this could go either way, but Us is definitely still a juggernaut in this league. Then we have Smile for the Kamara facing off against Mixing It Up. Both took a loss last week. Both are kind of losing some momentum. Mixing It Up has never really had momentum, to be honest with you. They're 2-6 now, really getting out of the running. Their division's pretty tough. Smile for the Kamara is still in the running, but they're just really blowing it away. They were a team that was really scoring well in the beginning and is now faded off as of recent weeks. So we'll see how they kind of shape up in the following weeks here, especially against Mixing It Up, where they could have a favorable matchup here. Then moving on to Picket Line, who already sustained their first loss, 7-1 now, and now they're facing off against How I Met Your Mother, and both these teams could do well with a win. Picket Line getting back in the situation of things of moving back up and momentum-wise, while How I Met Your Mother is just a couple losses away from being eliminated from playoff contention. How I Met Your Mother has great in points for, just has unfortunate matchups, so we gotta see if they can rebound from this week and be able to actually solidify themselves a little bit better. Interestingly enough, again, they're 2nd and 5th in points for, but How I Met Your Mother has significantly more losses. And breakdown, How I Met Your Mother has a decent breakdown record, which is basically comparatively to all the other teams in a given week. But they still just have not been doing very well. So we'll see how it kind of shapes up. Picket Line definitely wants to solidify that #1 spot, though. Addison Square Garden hooked on a Thielen. Both had a win last week. Both needed that win last week, and now they're butting each other's heads together to seeing who's going to actually rise up the rankings a little bit. Addison Square Garden needs a win to stay in the running in their division. Well, hooked on a Thielen needs to keep competitive with a winning record here. So going up before the 5-4 would be great for them. Their breakdowns are exactly even, so this is going to be a close matchup between these two. Meanwhile, Nakua Matata faces off against Krispy Kreme. Nakua Matata has went from one of the worst teams to one of the best teams, and they continue to do so every week. Last week, they scored the most points in a single week that any team has done so far, but they've also been known to score very few points in a given week. So who knows where the Nakua Matata could end up on the scale today. They need to actually be more consistent, though, if they want to make a big playoff run and actually put the points forward to their advantage. But who knows? Krispy Kreme has also been up and down, more in that little spectrum of high 80s, 90s, up to 120s, 130s, has done well. So they're 4-4. They actually have a better record than Nakua Matata. Let's see if they can keep the momentum against them and be able to get a win here. Then we have the Bryce is Right Us, of course, taking on Baskin-Robbins. Baskin-Robbins, again, one of the teams that performed very good early on, but this time it just has not been performing as well. They did pick up a win last week, going 5-3, 6th in points for, so they're in a respectable category. But the Bryce is Right lost some momentum last week after losing to Nakua Matata, so they need to kind of gain some momentum back, solidify their 2nd spot, and probably even pick up the picket line if they're really careful and easy about it all. The Bryce is Right has been really, really good, is leading in points for, and so we're dominating in that regard, but we're getting some unfortunate matchups here, so we'll see how this all can break down for it. Baskin-Robbins is no slouch either. Their team is pretty good. Despite the 44-44 breakdown record, they could easily upset the Bryce is Right this week. Finally, here's the standings, kind of update you all on where everybody stands, kind of get an idea of everything. No one has been eliminated from playoff contention yet. Maybe in the next couple of weeks that could happen, but right now everybody's still in the running. In the next couple of weeks, I mean like literally next couple of weeks in the game. So we'll see. And here's the Eliminator. If you don't know what the Eliminator is, basically the lowest scoring team that's still in the Eliminator Challenge each week is eliminated, and the winner just gets the Eliminator Trophy. It's nothing really big too special, just kind of a little cool thing to kind of highlight for the fantasy football. So either way, we have Picket Line, How I Met Your Mother, The Bryce is Right, and Addison Square Garden all still left in the Eliminator Challenge. So we do have a couple bye weeks to talk about, a couple teams to actually talk about, so let's go to the Excel sheet. On screen, you're going to see all the matchups this week, including all the buys that all the players are going to be facing and all that good stuff. So if they have a bye by their name, that means they're on a bye week. So we'll go quickly through it. But the teams on bye week this week are the Broncos, the Lions, the Jaguars, and the 49ers, leading some actually interesting implications here that we'll kind of go over here. Kittle Big Town's only losing CMC, which they haven't had in the whole season anyway, pretty much. So that's unfortunate for them, but oh well, they're still at full capacity. Greg Dulcich from Ominous is also gone, so it's going to be just T.J. Hawkinson scoring points for the tight end position today. Mixing it up, Jared Goff is gone, so they're going to be relying on Kenny Pickett. He has not scored very well this season, but maybe he can surprise us this week. Jake Moody will also be gone, so Justin Tucker, one of the best kickers in the NFL, will be picking up the slack. Then you got Javonte Williams saying bye this week, so Bijan, Damian Pierce, Kendre Miller, Chase Brown, Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette will all have to kind of pick up some slack here. But I think Leonard Fournette's a free agent, so that's going to be unfortunate for mixing it up. Small for the Camaros, losing Travis Etienne. That's about it. They still have plenty of good running back depth, so not too worried there. Pickett line has nobody. How I Metcalf, your mother has nobody. So nobody's really that affected from the bye weeks. Hooked on a Thielen has Marvin Mims and Deebo Samuel out, leaving 2 less receivers for a 3 wide receiver set at the very least. So Cooper, Adams, Watson, and Pittman will all have to kind of pick up some slack, but that's pretty good for wide receivers to kind of rely on here. Madison Square Garden is losing Russell Wilson, meaning Joe Burrow is the only quarterback to be counting this week. And Krispy Kreme's right here and Nakua Matata are easily 2 big teams affected by this. Interestingly enough, they are facing off against each other. Granted, I do see 2 other teams that are also really affected by it. But Krispy Kreme has Trevor Lawrence and Brock Purdy gone, meaning the quarterback position for them will not be counted at all this week. There's no substitute for that. Unfortunately, just lined up that way for him. So this week's going to be a little bit tougher. Jahmyr Gibbs, Samaje Perine, and Tank Bigsby will all be gone, meaning Roshan Johnson and Deion Jackson and Zach Evans will be the 3 running backs that they can count this week. Then you got Calvin Ridley gone, so that's unfortunate, but that's 1 less wide receiver, so I guess that's at least the bright side. There's only 1 wide receiver gone. And the Broncos defense is gone, so Titans defense is the only thing counting this week. Meanwhile, with Nakua Matata, they're losing David Montgomery, George Kittle, Christian Kirk, Will Lutz, and Jaguars, meaning Tyler Bass and the Chiefs and Taysom Hill will all be counted solely for those positional advantages. While Christian Kirk and David Montgomery going away is unfortunate, considering the running back depth here isn't very good, but the wide receiver depth should be able to carry at least a little bit. So we'll see who actually wins this matchup. So they're pretty evenly messed up. I still think Nakua Matata has a slight advantage here. Baskin Dobbins does have a little bit of a disadvantage as well. Jerry Jeudy, Evan Ingram, Brandon McManus, Lions defense, and Jameson Williams all gone this week. So basically, wide receiver positions got 2 wide receivers gone. Evan Ingram's gone, meaning Dalton Kincaid will be the sole guy here. Lions defense is gone, meaning Vikings defense is stepping up. Brandon McManus is gone, meaning Chad Ryland is up, which I think he's a free agent or a backup, one of the 2. And that's about it for this week. So that's going to be interesting to see how this actually ends up for Baskin Dobbins. The Bryce is right, of course. We actually have quite a few people on buys. 49ers defense is gone, so meaning Eagles defense has to step up. Simon Laporta is on bye week, so Kyle Pitts is sole in the tight end position. Elijah Mitchell is the only running back, so our running back depth is still pretty dang good. Then you got Cortland Sutton, Brandon Ayuk, and Amon St. Brown all gone, meaning Jordan Addison, Rashee Rice, and Nico Collins will all be the only wide receivers for the Bryce Rice. So we're actually a pretty big disadvantage here. We could definitely take an L, but luckily for us, Baskin Dobbins does have at least a little bit of a also disadvantage here too. So I'm curious to see actually how that stacks up for us this week. Meanwhile, besides these last 2 games, which are still pretty evenly, I think, distributed in terms of buys, there's no big games being affected by bye weeks, so we'll see how this kind of proceeds throughout the weeks. But it's time to see how the Madden NFL simulations shaped up for us this week. For injuries this week, Zamir White will be out for the next 6 weeks, so that's going to be unfortunate. They pretty much only come back for the playoffs, which, unfortunately, for the Raiders here and anybody who does have them drafted. Steelers will lose George Pickens for 2 weeks. I believe I've gone over this, but I thought I'd just cover it just in case I forgot. So that's unfortunate for any George Pickens owners here. Otherwise, nothing to note. There's no league transactions here. I'll let you see on screen all the news if you'd like to see it. There's no big transactions, like no releases, no re-signings, no signings, no trades that are big, significant. On screen now, you'll see the matchups for next week, including the standings for all the teams currently. And we'll go straight into the schedule to see how the games actually shaped up. That way you get an idea about how each of these games actually score-wise shaped up for these teams. That way you can see who won, who lost, who scored big, that type of deal. All that good stuff. In terms of stats, though, it's actually going to be an interesting week to take a look at because we're about midpoint for the season. to see how people are standing. A couple bye weeks are still there. A couple bye weeks are good. That kind of stuff. So in-season awards, weekly awards, Jalen Hurts being the player of the week for the NFC, and Zach Moss being the player of the week for the AFC. Zach Moss killed it this week. I believe he had the most points scored for fantasy football this week. Jalen Hurts, though, wasn't too far behind him with that rushing touchdown and many passing yards. So good for those two for leading up the pack here. In terms of actual stats here for all of the positions, that way you get a good idea about what players are doing well. Josh Allen's continuing to kill it. Dak Prescott's killing it. Patrick Mahomes is killing it. No surprise there. Derek Carr did have a couple good weeks, so he's up there in the yardage category at least too. Derrick Henry continues to be a beast. Bijan, Nick Chubb also in the conversation. Aaron Jones also had a pretty good week, so that's also to note. CeeDee Lamb consistently doing well. Has not found the end zone too many times since his big monster week, like in week 2 or week 3. Cooper Kupp consistently doing well. Chris Olave up there. Stephon Diggs. Christian Kirk still making a name for himself, so that's good. All the stats-wise, nothing changed too much, kind of solidifying people's roles here in the NFL Madden 24 Fantasy Football League. Either way, I think that's pretty much everything. No transactions and all that good stuff. So it's time to take a look about how these teams actually end up shaping up and seeing what the Week 9 results are. Week 9 is in the books, so it's time to see how each of these matchups actually ended up shaping out for each of these teams. Ominous versus Kittle Big Town. Ominous took a pretty easy victory. Knows 23-point difference, so you can take that as you may. Jalen Hurts, Gus Edwards, and Chuba Hubbard are the main teams, the main people helping to this week for him. Deontay Foreman normally has good weeks, but not this week. Khalil Herbert and Keenan Allen did not do very well. Everybody else did about mid or about what they were expected. So Kittle Big Town, unfortunately, it goes down to 4-5, while Ominous is increasing their stock more and more as the coming weeks. Yeah, Smile for the Kamara got their 4-5, while Mixing Up's 3-6 now. Mixing Up did get their third win this week, facing off against Smile for the Kamara, who has been pretty good, but who's lost a little bit of steam. So it was an unfortunate week. But DJ Moore and Elijah Moore, the Moores, more squared, if you will, took very good. Not precautions, but very good status here this week with their scores, while Kenny Pickett and Juju really could have done better for Mixing Up, but neither here or there. It didn't really matter. 7-point difference roughly, but Justin Fields and Tony Pollard try to keep Smile for the Kamara in. Unfortunately, just could not happen. Picket Line increases their win to 8-1 now against How I Met Your Mother to 2-7. This is very unfortunate for How I Met Your Mother now that it's really far behind, about 6 wins from the top. So I mean, it's going to be a long haul out of the gutter here for How I Met Your Mother. Zach Moss, even though he had a 34.8-point week, it just was not enough with only Dak Prescott contributing a whole lot. Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews didn't do a whole lot. While Picket Line just had consistency from across the board, but Josh Allen and Miles Sanders did have some pretty good scores this week. While DJ Chark and Brandon Cooks were 2.2, so a little bit more of a below average thing, but Picket Line still holding up one of the best record in the league so far by I think 2 wins now this week. As the Square Garden and Hooked on a Thielen, very close matchup between these two in terms of going into it, but Hooked on a Thielen lost by a pretty good margin. Hooked on a Thielen does tend to have pretty bad weeks despite having every now and then pretty good week. Tua was only outstanding player, while Christian Watson and Michael Pittman could have done a lot more for Hooked on a Thielen. As the Square Garden, though, needed this win to stay in the running in their division, while Derrick Henry and Michael Gallup really holding up a lot of points this week, while Odell Beckham and Quentin Johnson put up a big fat goose egg. So Addison Square Garden did get a little lucky this week, getting the 3rd best in points for, so good for them. This is one of the highest they've been so far, but they're now at 3-6, which should help them at least stay in the running a little bit for their division. Then you got Nakua Matata versus Krispy Kreme. A good, about average week for Nakua Matata, who has really done well last couple weeks, has now put themselves in 5th in points for, but they just kept it 8th. They face off against the worst performing team this week in Krispy Kreme. Not having a quarterback this week really hurt them, but honestly, I don't think it really would have mattered because 20-plus points wouldn't even have got them there. It would take about 25, 30 points, 35, yeah, something like that to actually get them to win. So Stephon Diggs tried to do something, but other than that, Jackson Smith-Njigba and Traylon Burks didn't do anything, while Taysom Hill is the only underperformer for Nakua Matata, who's now opening their stock a little bit. They're climbing up the rankings a little bit, getting closer to that prestigious division top. And you got the Price is Right taking their 3rd loss this week. It was unfortunate, and it was not a close matchup. Baskin-Dobbins actually had a really stellar week, 145 points between A.J. Brown, DeAndre Swift, Chris Godwin, and other players on their team, while Ramondre Stevenson was the only person who did really not good. While the Price is Right had good performers across the board, but this is one of the lowest they've ranked in points for in the season so far. So while they're keeping the first top spot for points for total season, they're 5th this week, which is unfortunate. They go down to 6-3, making Baskin-Dobbins also go up now to 6-3. They're 4th in points for, so not too far behind. Rondale Moore and Kyle Pitts are the 2 people that didn't do very well for the Price is Right, and Nico Collins and Anthony Richardson were better performers, but no one did extremely well except for maybe Nico Collins. Then here's the standings currently. As you see, 8-1 for Picket Line is topping the leaderboard. The Bryce is right, 6-3. Still got some slack between Kittle, Big Town, and mixing it up, but they're closing the gap steadily. Smile for the Kamara, hooked on a Thielen, and Krispy Kreme fighting for that top spot. They're all 4-5, which really not very good for a division. It's like the NFC South here. And How I Metcalf Your Mother, considering the division, still has a decent shot, considering that he still faces all of these 3 teams in the final 3 weeks. So anything can happen in this division. Well, Safety Sally's, Ominous and Baskin Dobbins really taking the top spot, but don't watch out for Nakua Matata, who's making a name for himself, especially possible wins every now and then. Could get him up there. Addison Square Garden is still in the conversation as well. No person is out of the running just yet, so we'll see how the coming weeks happens. But How I Metcalf Your Mother does get eliminated. Bryce is right, Picket Line, and Addison Square Garden all had top performers this week in terms of points for, while How I Metcalf Your Mother was on the lower side, I believe at 6th, actually just behind the Bryce is Right, who was 5th, 118 for the Bryce is Right, and let's see, and 112.6 for How I Metcalf Your Mother. So pretty dang close for the eliminator this week. But we do have a matchups going into week 10. Ominous versus Picket Line, probably the match of the week. Actually, definitely the match of the week, because these two teams are very, very close to each other. As you see, points for, very close, 4 points basically in points for. 8-1 though is Picket Line. They have not lost very much this season. Breakdown though from Ominous is actually slightly better. So we'll see how it kind of ends up. The last week points, Ominous would have gotten the advantage over Picket Line, but they've been a pretty close competing team, so we'll see how it goes this week. Addison Square Garden, Krispy Kreme, both need a win, both need momentum. I don't know who more. Krispy Kreme needs it to stay in the division, while Addison Square Garden needs it to stay, with the big juggernauts of their division. So anything can really happen here. Baskin Dobbins versus How I Metcalf Your Mother. How I Metcalf Your Mother desperately needs a win to even be in a conversation for the division. While Baskin Dobbins, same thing for him. He's fighting, tooth and nail for that division. So really could go either way. They're actually very similar in points for and in breakdown. So very even matchup here too. So even though we have like a more one-sided one here, we have 2 juggernaut matches, or at least very well competed matches here. I think I hooked on a Thielen versus Mixing It Up, more of a lower card matchup right here. Mixing It Up is just trying to get momentum where they can. But Hooked on a Thielen is in a close division, but they haven't been performing very well. So this could happen either way. Mixing It Up has had good weeks, while Hooked on a Thielen has had some good weeks too. So we'll see how it kind of really shapes up for both these teams. Then you got Smile for the Kamara versus the Bryce is Right. Both teams have kind of lost some momentum here recently. Both have had pretty good seasons. The Bryce is Right especially, 83-16 for the breakdown, but has lost some very unfortunate matchups. Smile for the Kamara has lost couple games here recently. That is just losing momentum, not really helping their case for the division, but still a close division. So a win here is crucial for them to really stay on the top of the conversation. And whoops, I went backwards. I was like, ooh, that's a matchup we've already seen. Nakua Matata versus Kittle Big Town. Both these teams are something weird to kind of watch for, because Kittle Big Town and Nakua Matata, despite being 4-5, have both performed decently well in certain weeks. Kittle Big Town has had good matchups against people, while Nakua Matata has had outrageous points scored. So this could go either way. Nakua Matata does have the slight edge, but both of these teams could benefit greatly from a win and keeping the conversation for their divisions. So that's kind of the what's called standings and the eliminators all the same. So we're almost done with the eliminator though, guys, but we do have some bye weeks to talk about. So, of course, going into Week 10, I believe, right? I'm not losing track yet. Week 10, we do have a couple teams that are on bye this week, if I can find them on top of my head here. It's the Rams, the Chiefs, the Dolphins, and the Eagles. There we go. Are all having bye weeks this week. So, a lot of important players, especially quarterback-wise, are gone this week. Looking at each matchup individually, though, Picket Line and Ominous are squaring off here, and they both have a few byes. Travis Kelce's gone for the Picket Line, meaning they have to rely on Gerald Everett. Rams defense is also gone, so they have to rely on the Packers defense. So both interesting, relying on, but Devon A-Chain is the only one gone here, meaning they all have to rely on James Cook, Joe Mixon, and Miles Sanders, which shouldn't be a big deal. But Ominous does have Jalen Hurts gone, meaning Kirk Cousins up the bat. You got Isaiah Pacheco, Devonta Smith, both gone, so I have to rely more on Jamal Williams, Deontay Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, and Evan Hull. For their matchups for the running back. While receiver-wise, they should be all right. Chase, Hopkins, Flowers, Bateman, Lockett should be all right overall. Then you got Jason Sanders gone, meaning Greg Zerlin of the Jets kicker will have to really step up the bat here. Addison Square Garden has nobody, so they're all good. Krispy Kreme has to rely on Matthew Wright, who I believe is still a free agent or just backup. I can't remember which one. So they'll probably have 0 points there because Harrison Butker is out. Zach Evans, running back, is going to be gone this week, meaning Jahmyr Gibbs and P. Ryan, Roshan Johnson, Deion Jackson, and Tank Bigsby all have to kind of pick up some slack here. But all those running backs are not very good overall for them, except for Jahmyr Gibbs. How I Metcalf Your Mother has Jalen Jalen Waddle gone. Dolphins defense, Jarrett McKinnon and Kadarius Toney. So receiver-wise, a little bit more light, but Justin Jefferson, Marquise Brown, Darnell Mooney, and Justin Ross. Justin Ross, I believe, is also a free agent, either that or practice squad on the Chiefs. So I think technically someone could sign him, but we'll kind of keep that one open here. Either way, though, receiver-wise going to be pretty light, while running back-wise still got a little bit of depth with Jonathan Taylor, Alexander Madison, Rashad White, so not too big of a deal there. Meanwhile, relying on the Chargers defense here this week for How I Met Your Mother. Baskin-Dobbins, though, isn't in the best situation either. Patrick Mahomes is gone, so Aaron Rodgers up to bat, so he has to have a pretty good week, in the air. Clyde Edwards-Helaire and DeAndre Swift are both gone, meaning Ramondre Stevenson, Aaron Jones, and Jalen Warren will have to step up. And then A.J. Brown is gone, so other receivers will kind of have to take up the mantle a little bit more. Mixing up versus hooked on a Thielen. Cooper Kupp's the only one gone for mixing it up, so pretty good for them. While Tua, Rashad Penny, Raheem Mostert, and Kenneth Gainwell are all gone, meaning Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, and Kareem Hunt are the 3 running backs. And I think Dalvin Cook's still a free agent. So hooked on a Thielen's going to have a very light running back room, and Jordan Love's going to play out of his mind for hooked on a Thielen to have a pretty good shot against mixing it up here. So this could be a good week for mixing it up to get really back in the runnings here, because I think every other team is decently matched up at the very least. I mean, Krispy Kreme's a little behind, but not terribly, while Ominous probably has a slight disadvantage compared to Picket Line. So there's going to be some interesting matchup implications here for these. Small for the Camaros, only losing Dallas Goedert and MVS, but they can rely on Dalton Schultz because Dallas Goedert's injured anyway, so they're in a pretty good situation. MVS been doing something every now and then, so otherwise the other 3 receivers should be all right up here, or we have Dobbs and Zay Jones are good backups. Rashee Rice in the Eagles defense for the Bryce's Right is gone, so we'll have to rely on the 49ers defense and the other receivers, but I think we have a pretty good wide receiver room to really not worry too much, so that matchup shouldn't be affected too much. Then finally, you got Nakua Matata versus Kittle Big Town. Tyreek Hill's gone. Big note there for Nakua Matata, but they still got pretty good wide receiver depth. Garrett Wilson, Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Michael Thomas. Eventually all of them kind of do decently well. Chiefs defense is gone, so Jaguars defense will be up to bat, which hit or miss depending. Jake Elliott will be gone for Kittle Big Town, meaning Bat Gay for the Colts are up to bat. Well, Tyler Higbee's gone, so David Njoku for the Browns are also up to bat. Sky Moore doesn't really score much or at all pretty much ever, so he's gone, so it's not that big of a deal, but they still got the starting receivers here for Kittle Big Town. So there's some interesting implications for each of the matchups. I'm kind of curious how Madden actually ended up simming this week. This week, we do have a couple injuries to make note of. Austin Eckler is out for 4 weeks, meaning it's pretty much going to be in the end of the playoffs for Austin Eckler here. And we also have, I believe, Alvin Kamara is out for a couple weeks now with dislocated knee, so also kind of a playoff berth kind of person. So Alvin Kamara, actually, no, Alvin Kamara will make it back in time. I think Austin Eckler technically makes it back right before the playoffs. So they should both actually make it back, but both of them are still out nonetheless here. No big league transactions. Nobody was picked off free agency. No one was traded, all that good stuff. But we'll go to news and kind of show you case if you want to read any of the big news stories. I know it's a little cut off for you guys, but it's all right. It's not that. There's nothing too big of a deal to make note of here. There's the kind of league standing with the week schedule right now. If you want to kind of see the following week about which teams are doing well, which teams are doing good or bad or whatever. Currently, the schedule, we'll take a look at this past week and kind of show you who did well, who did not. Carolina, really, really good. I haven't actually tallied up any of these just yet, so it's actually kind of a little bit new to me. For this week. So there you go, a little bit of results hedging here. Then we have the stats to kind of showcase here. I believe actually I did take a look at this. Some decent stats, but nothing crazy for offensive player of the week. Bryce Young and Joe Burrow both did really, really well. Especially Joe Burrow on the ground, but Bryce Young had a lot of yards and a lot of passing touchdowns, and at least it's some on the ground, so good for him. In terms of individual stats here, we'll kind of take a look at who's leading the NFL right now. Dak Prescott continues to do well. Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins is actually up there too, so he must have had a good week. Patrick Mahomes did pretty well, and Derek Carr still kind of in that little running category. Derrick Henry, though, still continues to be a beast. Aaron Jones also. Bijan's making more of a name for himself. Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, etc., are doing pretty well. CeeDee Lamb also is just leading the pack now with the receiving yards here, so good for CeeDee Lamb. Justin Jefferson's also still up there. While I think, Nico Collins has been finding the end zone a whole lot. 10 touchdowns total, which is kind of crazy. Christian Kirk, though, continues to also bring up his stock a lot for the receiving teams. So there you go there. I think that's pretty much everything we got to cover here. I don't think there was anything I'm forgetting here with the kind of stats-wise to kind of be searching for. The league transactions, like I said, nothing there. So we'll go into seeing actually how these matchups ended up shaping out. Good old double-digit week 10. Here are the results of this week's programming. Oh, programming. That's a pretty good word of the day. Either way, Ominous and Picket Line, 2 monsters, juggernauts facing off this week, and they did not disappoint. 10-point difference. Pretty nice and pretty close. Whoops. little spoiler. Pretty nice and pretty close. In the end, though, Picket Line takes its second loss, and Ominous is showing how much of a monster it can be in this matchup. They are now second in points for 6 points ahead of Picket Line, so they may swap it back and forth. But these two are going to be some good juggernauts for the playoffs, potentially, at least, if other teams don't pass them. Ominous had Chuba Hubbard, Kirk Cousins, T.J. Hawkinson all do really well for them. Zay Flowers and Deontay Foreman didn't do that well. While Picket Line had everybody perform fine except for Tyler Boyd and T.J. Chark, didn't really step up this week. So unfortunately for Picket Line, they did not really secure anything this week. So Ominous took advantage of it and is moving forward and has now kind of basically surpassed Picket Line in kind of power rankings area. But Picket Line still has a 1 win over them. So we'll see. Addison Square Garden, Krispy Kareem's faced off, and it was pretty one-sided. Addison Square Garden did really well. Joe Burrow and Derrick Henry carried, while DK and Odell Beckham both kind of fell to the wayside. Krispy Kareem's tried to do something with Brock Purdy and CeeDee Lamb doing well, but Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley really couldn't pick up any of the slack here. Granted, Trevor Lawrence didn't need to because Brock Purdy carried, but either way, Krispy Kreme just cannot catch a break. They fall down to 4-6, while Addison Square Garden has been on a win streak to kind of bring up their win-loss ratio here. Moving on to Baskin Dobbins versus How I Metcalf Your Mother. How I Metcalf Your Mother got a crucial win here, especially when the rest of the division lost. How I Metcalf Your Mother's now up to 3-7 by barely winning at 6 points. Justin Jefferson, Dak Prescott did really well for him, while Marquise Brown was fine. 4.4 is not very good though. Baskin Dobbins though only had Aaron Jones really do well. Everybody else did about average. Evan Ingram and Rondre Stevenson were both really bad this week. So Baskin Dobbins did fall to the wayside here, especially How I Metcalf Your Mother. Now kind of getting closer to the power range of Baskin Dobbins, just not with win-wise. So it's not too late for How I Metcalf Your Mother to kind of get back into this thing. So we'll see. Hooked on a Thielen versus mixing it up again. What I thought was going to be really one-sided, but Hooked on a Thielen did what Hooked on a Thielen usually does sometimes. They have really good weeks, and all of a sudden they fall to the wayside. 89 points is not very impressive. Worse this week. Devontae Adams is the only one on this roster that did anything. Christian Watson, Amari Cooper, Michael Pittman all did pretty bad for Hooked on a Thielen, so they took the loss this week, going down to 4-6, while mixing it up, going up to 4-6, with DJ Moore doing really well, but overall, really just was an average setup for everybody else. So Deontay Johnson, Elijah Moore, and T. Higgins didn't really carry anything either. So mixing it up is getting a little bit lucky. 4-6 is nice and easy, especially considering How I Metcalf Your Mother's 3-7, and they have way more points for it. Smile for the Kamara and Bryce's Right face off this week, but Bryce's Right had an amazing week. Saquon Barkley and Kyle Pitts doing extraordinarily well, while Anthony Richardson and Rondale Moore did not do very well. Smile for the Kamara had a respectable amount of points, with Adam Thielen doing well and Terry McLaurin not doing well, but in the end, the Bryce's Right has been a juggernaut to face off, and they're only at 7-3. They are very beatable, but this week has shown the Bryce's Right is definitely one of the biggest contenders for the playoffs and the championship at the end. Then we got Nakua Matata versus Kittle Big Town. Nakua Matata, I think, is now establishing themselves somewhere in the middle range. They are now 4th in points for, so they're going up even more and more. Second of the week. Lamar Jackson, 30.9 points, amazing. George Kittle, 18.2 points, good. Michael Thomas and David Montgomery, not as good. While Kittle Big Town, they fought valiantly, 96.6 points, not very impressive though. Khalil Herbert and Mike Williams did not do well. And Najee Harris is the only person of note that you could really, point somewhere. So Kittle Big Town did need a win here, but Nakua Matata honestly probably needed it more, going up to 5-5, being pretty, fives across the board, 5-5, 55 and 55. Look at Nakua Matata go. Here are the standings, pretty much the same. I don't think anything changed technically. Field Goal Fiends is still struggling though. 4-6 is the top spot here. While How I Metcalf Your Mother is only a 1 win, basically separating this whole division. Extra Point Pirates basically goes down to Picket Line and Bryce's Right, and then Kittle Big Town and mixing it up, trying to fight for that next spot, trying to get in that third, maybe wild card spot, because it's going to be really hard for anybody in Field Goal Fiends for them to get a wild card spot. So they're kind of just fighting for their division. Safety Sallies, this is also very interestingly close. I think Ominous is securing the top spot, but be careful about Baskin Dobbins and Nakua Matata here. They're not just too far off either, especially with the divisional matches coming up. And surprisingly enough, Picket Line was the lowest scoring person this week of the people remaining, meaning between the Bryce's Right and Addison Square Garden, one of these guys will win the eliminator, depending on who scores more. If the Bryce's Right scores more than the Addison Square Garden, Bryce's Right wins. If the Addison Square Garden scores more than the Bryce's Right this next week, then they win. We'll find out this week. I'm very excited because it's going to kind of crown our champion for eliminator. Does it really matter? No, not really, but might as well kind of award some things along the way. Why not? It's a fun thing that our fantasy football league did, so why not me? Either way, that is the league so far. Now we do have the matchups of week 11 established and ready to go. Addison Square Garden and the Bryce's Right, actually didn't really realize this. They are the finals of the the eliminator, and they're facing off against each other. So whoever wins this week is just the winner of the eliminator, which is really fun. Okay, that's cool. Either way, they're both coming off a win, and both have been doing pretty well, but the Price is Right has been a juggernaut, so Aston Square Garden does have a uphill battle to climb. Meanwhile, you got Hooked on a Thielen versus Nakua Matata. Right now, this looks like a one-sided matchup with Nakua Matata doing really, really well. But Hooked on a Thielen every now and then has good weeks. So this is kind of the battle of the explosive or the non-explosive weeks, because both these teams tend to do that quite a bit. Either way, we'll see how this ends up. Oh, this is, by the way, the last regular season matchup that isn't divisional based, so that'll be interesting to see as well. Ominous and Smile for the Kamara. Again, one of those matchups that looks like it could be one-sided, but Smile for the Kamara has had a couple good weeks, but we just haven't seen them in a while. So Ominous is one of the juggernauts. Can they keep their streak going? Kittle Big Town versus How I Met Your Mother. I think at this point this is going to be pretty make or break for one of these teams to really get a win here for them. So 4-6 for Kittle Big Town, 3-7 for How I Met Your Mother. We're starting to close into the final weeks of the regular season, and teams are going to start getting slowly knocked off of the playoff contention. One of these teams could possibly be it, so we'll see how this goes. Baskin Dobbins versus Picket Line, both took an L. Both have been promising teams, and both are still arguably some bigger, more prosperous teams. But both have lost a little bit of momentum. We'll see who ends up taking the win here. Last week, their scores were pretty similar, so it could happen again this week. Krispy Kremes versus mixing up two teams in very similar situations, but Krispy Kreme really needs this win to stay in the division. But it's the battle of the two worst teams points wise. They both just barely have over 1,000. Mixing Up has finally got out of that 12th spot, so Krispy Kreme's looking to maybe win and get over the spot back to 11th at the very least. But two not very good teams, but we'll see how it shapes up for them. And again, the standings and eliminators are all the same here. So now we will go into the bye weeks to check if there's any bye weeks. On screen now, you're going to see the Excel spreadsheet for week 11. Here are the bye weeks to all worry about. It's the Colts, the Patriots, the Falcons, and the Saints. All four of those teams will be on bye weeks this week, and there's actually big implications for some of these teams, some more than others. Anthony Richardson's gone for the Price is Right, so Kyler Murray will be the sole quarterback there. Kyle Pitts will be gone for the tight end position, so Sam Laporta will be the sole position there too. As the Square Garden's not affected at all, so they could pick up a crucial win against the Price is Right here. Nakua Matata will have Zeke out, Tyler Algier, Michael Thomas, and Taysom Hill, meaning George Kittle's the only tight end. But the running back position will also be fairly light because Tyler Algier and Zeke will be out. So J.K. Dobbins, David Montgomery, and Joshua Kelly will all be up to bat for the team, while Michael Thomas being out is just an inconvenience. Saints defense is gone for Hooked on a Thielen, so Texans are going to step up to the bat, while Michael Pittman will be out, so they'll have to rely on the three starters, as well as Christian Watson and Marvin Mims. So not too bad for Hooked on a Thielen. Nakua Matata could be a little disadvantaged, but it should still be pretty close. Ominous will have Jamal Williams and Evan Hull gone, meaning Isaiah Pacheco and Deontay Foreman and Gus Edwards will be the running backs to really worry about here. I believe that. I think that's all of them. Smile for the Kamara. We'll have Graham Gano out, meaning Santos for the Bears will be the only kicker. And Zay Jones is the receiver gone, so they'll have to rely on the other receivers there. Not too big of a deal. Kittle Big Town, though, is suffering quite a bit here because remember, Christian McCaffrey is hurt. They're losing Chris Olave, Van Jefferson. So those are the two receivers they're gone. So they'll have to rely on four receivers solely. Then you got Derek Carr gone, so they're relying on Justin Herbert. Then you have Alvin Kamara gone and Cordero Patterson, meaning they're relying on Najee Harris and Tajay Spears and Khalil Herbert. And then you have Matt Gay gone and the Patriots defense, meaning there's no defense they're allowed to have. So they essentially have 9 positions. And Jake Elliott will be the sole kicker for the team. Well, How I Met Your Mother is significantly less disadvantaged, but still disadvantaged. Jonathan Taylor will be gone, so Alexander Madison, Rashad White, Jarrett McKinnon, all of them will have to step up. Young Ho Koo will be gone, so Mason Crosby, who I believe is a free agent or is a backup somewhere, I believe he's a free agent though, will basically put up a goose egg. Then you have Jawan Johnson being tight end gone. Mark Andrews has been usually carrying it, so that's not too big a deal. And Zach Moss will be gone as well, leaving, again, the running back position a little bit lighter, but still not too bad. Then we got Picket Line losing Drake London and Alec Pierce, so receiver-wise is going to be a little bit lighter, but not too bad. Baskin Dobbins will lose Ramondre Stevenson and Chad Ryland, and Brandon McManus has basically been carrying this whole season already for Baskin Dobbins, so no big deal there. Ramondre has been in and out of really good or really bad, so we'll see how that goes for them. Krispy Kreme is not affected at all, while mixing it up we'll lose Bijan and Kendre Miller in the running back department, leaving Damian Pierce, Javonte Williams, Leonard Fournette, and Chase Brown. A bunch of backups basically to fend off the Krispy Kremes. And Juju McSchuster is going to be the other receiver, or the receiver gone, leaving 5 other receivers, 3 receivers up here and 2 receivers down here to basically fend off the attacker. So interesting matchups here. Nothing too disadvantaged except maybe Nakua Matata against Hooked on a Thielen, and of course Kittle Big Town against How I Met Calf Your Mother. But this will be interesting to see how all this shapes up. But let's go into Madden now to figure out actually how all these teams did. Injury-wise, the only new person up to bat is Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham will be out for 5 weeks, leaving pretty much into deep playoff territory for them, which I was really kind of mistaken in the other categories, I think, with the other players. But there's a couple players that are out for a week. I think CD Lamb's one of them. Kamara's still out for 2 weeks, stuff like that. DeAndre Hopkins is out for a week. So a couple of small things here and there, but again, the big one there was already kind of noted for you. League-wise, or yeah, hold up. Yeah, we'll go through the news. Make sure you see all the news. And again, nothing too big, except you see Pacheco did really good this week with 3 rushing touchdowns. So we'll take a look at how well points-wise he actually really did. I'm sure he'll be on the top of the leaderboards for his team. Then, of course, here's the schedule right now. Here's the standings after this week, of course. And we'll go ahead and look at the schedule for the previous week. That way you get a good idea of which teams did good and which teams did bad. I do see some high-scoring ones, see some lower-scoring ones. So I'll be curious to see how actually all the points shaped up. But Kansas City did score 35 points. So that's pretty good for them in that regard. Now, in terms of stats, I do not believe many of the stats changed, but there were some interesting stat leaders here this week in terms of the award winners, in-season awards, weekly awards, of course. Cooper Kupp, 3 receiving touchdowns and 280 receiving yards. That's going to break the record of the most receiving points here in the most points in a given season, because that's already 28 plus 18, which on top of my head, of course, is 46. But not to only mention that, 46 plus 7 is going to be 53 points. So I don't think we've seen 53 points from anybody just yet. But again, Lamar Jackson over there, 7 rushing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and 271 passing yards. Dang good too. So we have a lot of players who did really well. We're going to benefit a lot from this. Either way, we'll go look at the stat lines for all the teams so far. That way you get a good idea of who's doing well. Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins, all killing it. Kirk Cousins has more turnovers, though. Patrick Mahomes kind of been quiet last couple weeks. Aaron Rodgers did pretty well. Rushing-wise, Derrick Henry's still leading the league, while Aaron Jones is respectable. Saquon's finding the end zone. Josh Jacobs and Bijan are also in the conversation as well. CeeDee Lamb consistently staying near the top, but not finding the end zone as much. Cooper Kupp put up a lot of yards, helping him solidify a top spot there. Justin Jefferson's doing well. Nico Collins keeps finding the end zone. Christian Kirk every now and then gets a good advantage here and there. So we'll see how these receivers actually end up doing in the future, but that's pretty much all that we have to go over. There's no big league transactions, no pickups, no trades. Of course, trades are pretty much done at this point, so because they're not really allowed to. So it's going to be curious. So let's find out who actually won these matchups. Things are getting heated as we're showing the Week 11 results here. Pretty much almost there. One more episode of the regular season away. Madison Square Garden and Bryce is Right. The Bryce is Right. Ed did amazing with the second most points scored this whole season. Nico Collins, Kenneth Walker, Brandon Ayuk, Saquon Barkley, all scoring 20 plus points, easily helping close out that 185.1 points. But Madison Square Garden didn't do bad, even defeat. 4-7 is what they dropped down to. But they had James Conner, Joe Burrow, Derrick Henry all do 20 plus points. But Odell Beckham did 0. A couple other people kind of did a little bit average, if not on the lower end of average. So unfortunately, paired up with the Bryce is Right this week is an unfortunate matchup, and the Bryce is Right raises its stock up to 8-3. We got Hooked on a Thielen versus Nakua Matata, and Hooked on a Thielen again just did not do very well. 73.1 points, one of the lowest scoring points in a given week every year. While Nakua Matata did pretty well. Certain average out their points a little bit more. Instead of just going 185 or 70, they're actually starting to average it out a little bit, going up to 6-5, which is going to be crucial for them to stay in the playoff race. Then we got Ominous versus Smile for the Kamara. Ominous, one of the best teams, has become one of the best teams in the league. Goes up to 8-3 with 155.8 points scored, beating out Smile for the Kamara, who had a pretty okay week, but again, just not enough to win against one of the top teams in the league. Then we got Kittle Big Town facing off against How I Met Calf Your Mother, and How I Met Calf Your Mother is bringing themselves back a little bit. 4-7 is what they raised their stock up to, and we'll show you how the standings are looking. But How I Met Calf Your Mother did do a big jump. 7th in points for, so they're kind of staying on the lower end. They're not really having the breakout weeks, but Dak Prescott and Mark Andrews helped them enough to get into the groove of things. Well, Kittle Big Town now has the record of the lowest scoring points in a given week. 50.9 points is not very impressive for themselves. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Najee Harris. They did go very Chargers heavy with Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen. So whenever they don't do well, it's really hard for them to kind of pull something out of it. So unfortunately for you, Kittle Big Town, you're down to 4-7. Baskin Dobbins and Pickett Line, very good matchup, but Pickett Line just ended up winning. Again, one of the top teams in the league right now, 133.7 points. Travis Kelce, Brandon Cooks, Mike Evans, all did really well. Meanwhile, Baskin Dobbins just did fine. You know, they're staying in the relevancy, but 6-5 is still not very good if they want to stay in the contentions in their division. Then we got Krispy Kreme versus Mixing It Up. Again, two of the lower scoring teams, but Mixing It Up has raised their stock quite a bit here this week. Cooper Kupp having 53 points. the single most points scored by at least an individual that was drafted in the race. I guess I don't really keep track of many people who weren't drafted, but still, Cooper Kupp, 53 points. Basically, just kind of carried it. It was 1/3 of the points scored by mixing it up, and pretty much almost by himself, Cooper Kupp could have beat Krispy Kreme this week, who also had a really bad week, because Stephon Diggs, Jahan Dotson, Calvin really didn't do well. They also drafted really badly when you really look at it, so when their players don't do good at all, it's kind of hard for them to kind of stay in the race. So mixing it up, maybe you stay in the conversation. Going to 5-6, even with being 9th in points for, could be something interesting to see. Either way, here are the standings currently. Pickett line still in first. Bryce is right behind him. Mixing it up, staying in the conversations, and Kittle Big Town bottoming out the division. You got How I Met Your Mother jumping from last to first in the Field Goal Fiends division, just purely because the whole division lost once again, except for How I Met Your Mother, who also had the most points for. So now they're all tied, and now it's going down to points for to be the determiner there. You got Safety Sally's pretty much the same conversation there, except Nakum Batata and Baskin Dobbins are really fighting close for a second place spot there. But I will say, now we're in the playoff race in terms of officially seeing what teams are eliminated. There are two teams eliminated from the playoff contention completely, because we have 3 weeks left, 3 divisional games ready to go, and those 2 teams are going to be Addison Square Garden and Kittle Big Town. On the right, you're going to see the 6 teams that are outside the bubble, but on the bubble, basically. They can still be in the playoff picture, and that's kind of the current seeding right now. And we're going to have 3 different playoffs in the playoffs. So the one you're seeing on the screen, Pickett line being number 4, being number 1, the Bryce is Right being number 4, Ominous being number 2, and How I Met Your Mother being number 3. That's the regular playoffs. That's for the championship. But 5, 6, 7, and 8 will have the mid-off playoff title. So basically, they're going to fight for who's the best mid-team. Then you got 9, 10, 11, and 12 who will face off in the trash bowl or the toilet bowl or something like that. Basically showing who's going to be the best of the worst teams, essentially. So this is kind of the current playoff picture right now. Addison Square Garden, Kittle Big Town have no way of making it to the playoffs. Meanwhile, Nakum Matata, Baskin Dobbins mixing it up, Alvin Small for the Kamara, Hooked on a Thielen, Krispy Kremes are all still in the conversations at least, especially at division with How I Met Your Mother. The seedings is based on basically, it goes by division winners first, and then the wild cards get to the 4th spot. So no matter what, the Bryce is right now, being behind Pickett line makes them the number 4 seed. So no big advantage that way. It's just how I'm going to seed things up. Of like number 1 seed will get the kind of like a call. They'll get the lower seed guy. So it doesn't really matter that much in terms of everything. I guess in hindsight, you could also say number 1 seed gets to choose like the most favorable matchup, but I don't see how that really matters. So number 1 seed will face number 4 seed, number 2 seed faces number 3 seed. Sue me, that type of deal. So here's our current playoff picture, and this will be for every week going forward. In the Eliminator, we officially have the winner of the Eliminator. The Bryce is Right. No contention about that. We have been the highest scoring, or at least higher scoring team to not get eliminated. And so we get the Eliminator challenge, or get the Eliminator trophy, or whatever. So really cool for us to be the last team to actually make it through. So thumbs up to us. This will just be on every slide now from now on. But with that, I mean, we're going into week 12 now. Things are getting intense. Divisional round is next. So let's go ahead and just show you the Excel sheet. That way we get a good recap of the whole week, or a few weeks. On screen now will be the next 3 weeks. So the very middle of the screen right now is host to week 9. So you can see all the scorings and how everything kind of landed up being. So kind of let you cover my bases basically. That way you can see who did what, how well they did, and all that good stuff. I'm trying to make sure you're able to see everything. You are perfect. Week 10, of course, and then we still have 3 more weeks of regular season, so it's going to get really intense. And don't forget that the playoffs will work in a 2-week span. So basically, week 15 and 16 will be the semifinals, and those 2 weeks will be scored together to determine the winner. And then week 17 and week 18 will be the championships for each of the playoffs, including the consolidation losers bracket type deals, because whoever loses in the first rounds of their playoffs will also get the fight for being the worst or best team, and we'll rank them from there. So that's the cool thing here. And I don't know how we're going to continue this series in the future in terms of whether I'm going to just do it in Madden again, but with different styles or whatever. But that's going to be up for me to kind of determine in the future. Either way, guys, hope you enjoyed this other episode of Madden Fantasy Football. It's a little bit different, but I enjoy it. So see you guys later. StraightA Dawson out.